Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Maricel Halili.
And I'm Pauline Verzosa.
Tonight's big stories: a dip in the trust and performance ratings of President Bongbong Marcos and Vice President Sara Duterte amid the political feud they are embroiled in.
Still on PBBM, he could be signing the 2025 national budget on December 30, at least in a ceremonial setting, after the document gets a thorough review from him and his economic team.
And offshore gaming operators get a final warning from the Immigration Bureau: leave by December 31st or face the consequences.
And as we always say here on The Big Story, another day, another survey. Actually, make that surveys.
We are bringing you just a couple of several polls that were released before the end of the year. First, findings from the Ulat ng Bayan National Survey of Pulse Asia conducted in November.
Now there's the trust and performance ratings of top government officials, and political bickerings over the past months aren't helping their numbers any.
In the survey conducted between November 26 and December 3, President Bongbong Marcos lost 2 points in his approval rating from September's 50%. His trust rating also slightly dropped to 47 from 48%. A bigger decline, though, for his Vice President Sara Duterte. The VP's approval ratings slid by 10 points, while her trust numbers also dropped by 2 digits from 61% in September to 49% in November. The rating slip happened at the time Duterte had public outbursts against the Marcos administration and was slapped with impeachment complaints.
Now, as for Congress leaders, Senate President Francis Escudero saw his numbers declining by as much as 7 points. Speaker Martin Romualdez, on the other hand, also had dips in his ratings and is now nowhere near the majority approval and trust ratings. The Pulse Asia survey had 2,400 adult respondents and has a ±2 margin of error. Now, for a political scientist, this survey and those that will come after will be a litmus test for the Marcos administration and its political hold, especially in the upcoming midterm elections.
Definitely, no. The midterm elections is always a testament vote to the administration. No? So whether or not the public has the sabihin na natin the confidence, no, to the president, makikita natin yan dito sa kakalabasan ng ating election.
As to the observation that President Marcos's numbers are dipping much too soon or 2 years into his term, Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin has this take. While he acknowledges that surveys are dipstick readings of the well of public opinion, they should not be used as sole basis in the governance scorecard. If this becomes the case, Bersamin stressed, then focus will be taken away from other more important metrics of leadership, such as employment.
Pulse Asia has also released the results of its survey for the 2025 senatorial race. So did another pollster, Octa Research. Both had on its #1 spot ACT-CIS representative Erwin Tulfo. Pulse Asia's list is a mix of neophytes, re-electionists, and returning senators. Also on the top are former Senate President Tito Soto, incumbent Senators Bongo and Pia Cayetano, broadcaster Ben Tulfo, and former Senator Manny Pacquiao. Octa Research, meantime, had the Tulfo brothers ranked first and second. Octa Research conducted a survey between November 10 and 16 among 1,200 adult respondents with a margin of error of ±3. Pulse Asia's poll was done between November 26 and December 3.
Let's take a closer look at the survey numbers from Pulse Asia President Ronald Holmes. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and helping us make sense of the figures.
Good evening, Gretch, Maricel, and Pauline.
Ronald, this survey is from the period of November 26 to December 3. We saw the trust and approval ratings of both the president and vice president go down with significant numbers, with the vice president being double digits. And we also are seeing that it is only the Senate President, Chis Escudero, who enjoys majority approval. What do the numbers say about that time period?
Well, basically, this is something quite distinct, for the top four officials to see a dip not just a dip, but really that their trust and approval ratings, at least for 3 of the 4, have gone below a majority. We have not seen this in the 2 prior administrations. That's the administration of Duterte and Noynoy Aquino. At the same time, during their term, the president, the vice president, the speaker of the House then, or more specifically, the president and the vice president were enjoying significant majority approval and trust. Compare this to the president and the vice president right now. Both of them don't have majority approval and trust ratings.
Okay, tama po ba na ayaw ng mga Pilipino na nag-aaway ang mga politiko natin? Does this mean that the longer that they go with this conflict, the numbers will also head down south?
Well, basically, I think it applies to all political systems. The public would not want their top officials to be bickering or in conflict because it deflects attention away from addressing major concerns. So it's not just us Filipinos. I think in many surveys in other countries, when there's a gridlock between the executive and the legislative, for example, there's a tendency for the people to withdraw their approval or trust towards both institutions.
Pero sir, ang napansin ko dito, of course, lahat ng top officials natin, bumaba yung kanilang approval and trust rating. Pero kapansin-pansin din yung numbers ng mga undecided. Malaki rin. How should we interpret this?
Well, ang indecision pinangmalaki sa Speaker of the House at pangkaraniwan yan, no? Kasi yung Speaker of the House ay miyembro ng kapulungan ng mga kinatawan, ini-elect yan sa isang distrito, yung distrito na yung limitado, hindi yan pambansang posisyon. Ay hindi yan nahalal sa buong bansa. Ibig sabihin, hindi ganun hindi nationally prominent yung Speaker of the House. Kaya hindi siya masyadong kilala at dahil hindi siya masyadong kilala, maaring mas maraming hindi masabi kung aprobado o hindi aprobado o kung nagtitiwala o hindi nagtitiwala sa kanya. Pero doon sa presidente, vice-presidente at doon sa Senate President, makikita natin na yung indecision hindi ganun kalaki. No? Maaring sabihin na 2 sa 10, pero parang inilipat lang yung nag-a-approve dati, yung nagtitiwala, lumilipat na sandali lang. Hindi ko na masabi ngayon kung nagtitiwala ako o hindi nagtitiwala sa inyo.
But, dahil mababa yung kanilang performance and trust rating, how will this translate to the elections next year?
Well, it's a midterm election, and essentially the ones running for the midterm election, although they belong to specific slates, you have a full slate that has been declared by the administration. But if you look at that full slate itself, there are candidates there that have identified themselves as more or less independent. No, they're not running with a political party. Even the president's sister has said that I'm thankful that I'm included in the slate, but I'd rather run as an independent. So that gives you a very clear idea that those individuals would actually be competing among themselves. They may belong to a slate, but right now, we're not so clear in terms of who would be in the opposition and who would be in the administration. Some people claim to be in the opposition, but essentially they're just simply a faction of what used to be a united administration.
Okay, Sir Ronald, let's zero in on Vice President Sara Duterte. As Gretchen mentioned earlier, her trust and approval rating slid by double digits. And with 3 impeachment complaints already filed against her, what do you think these could do to her numbers?
Well, she has to recover. What has happened in the past 3 months is that because of the reaction to her press conferences, because of her unwillingness to explain the alleged misuse of confidential funds, we saw a decline in her approval and trust, even in an area where she used to enjoy more or less universal approval and trust in Mindanao. And that's the reason why from 60 approval in the past in September, her approval right now is just simply half, 50%, and her trust rating has gone down to less than a majority. So there's a withdrawal in terms of approval and trust in the Visayas and Mindanao, 2 areas where she used to draw so much support from.
Does it mean she shouldn't continue her late-night press conferences via Zoom? I mean, the father also did that. Putting them side by side, ano po ba yung effect noon kay Pangulong Duterte kay VP Sara ngayon?
Well, Gretch, yung nakaraan, yung presidente lumalabas, o at least yung recorded na pahayag niya, lumalabas pa tapos ng hating gabi. Pero yun ay pagpapaliwanag kung anong ginagawa ng gobyerno dun sa harap ng COVID, no, na inaharap natin ng panahon ngayon. Ngayon, well, at least yung isa lang ang late night o early morning or dawn press conference, madalas ay nagaganap na ngayon sa working hours. But ang ano dyan, ang mahalaga dyan ay kung ano yung kanyang binabanggit doon, kung ano yung kanyang sinasabi na maaring nakakapagtanggal o nakakabawi o maaring nakakapagpanatili ng pagtitiwala at approval sa pagganap ng kanyang tungkulin. Medyo talagang yung banggaan nila ng presidente ay medyo nag-escalate na. Kaya nakikita natin, hindi lang naapektuhan ng presidente. Let me clarify, the president's approval and trust did not significantly change. It's not statistically significant. Although we saw a drop less than the majority in September. It's the vice president, only the vice president saw a significant change, not the president. In terms of approval and trust.
I want to go back to Mase's question about how this translates to the midterm elections. Does this affect their endorsement power? Those who try to ride on the coattails of, let's say, President Marcos, the administration slate, and the Duterte slate, may epekto po ba yung trust and approval doon sa endorsement nila sa mga kandidato nila?
Well, if we simply look at the numbers based on the survey data, wala masyadong ganong ka-epekto yung endorsement. It's not so much an endorsement of people who say that they're approving or trusting, let's say, of Bongbong Marcos or Sara Duterte. When we look at the people that are part of their slate or are allied with them, we don't see a significant change in terms of the electoral support. So that means the people who are running for the Senate, at least in the survey that we conducted, are drawing support independent of how they position themselves with regard to their approval or trust of the two top officials.
But if we check the lineup of the top senatorial candidates na nakalagay dun sa senatorial survey ng Pulse Asia, sir, majority pa rin endorsed by President Bongbong Marcos. Although, napansin ko dito, tumaas si Senator Bongo, is of course a known ally of the Dutertes. Pasok na rin si Senator Bato de la Rosa. And nandun na rin si Willie Revillame. So how should we interpret this if hindi pa pala siya influenced nung approval and trust ratings ng top officials?
Kaya, basically, they're just generating support on their own. If you look at, for example, the support, there's an increased support really for incumbent Senator Bongo. But I would surmise, or I would argue that support is largely because of the program that he has implemented over the past 6 years, no? Which is actually a program that has helped many, but it's not a program that legislators are known to, are supposed to be implementing.
The Malasakit centers.
Yung Malasakit Center, which is actually president siya nung mas malaking programa na pinapatupad ng parehong Kamara ng Kongreso o ng Department of Health, yung MAIP. So in that sense, people might associate him with that, people are associating him with that Malasakit Center. And he has labeled himself as Mr. Malasakit, right? So there's that connection. And that probably is the one drawing support. It's not so much whether he's allied to the Dutertes. It's him being the one that created a program that has provided assistance, different types of assistance to individuals or to individual Filipinos for that matter.
Isa sa mga nakakagulat dito na banggit mo na, si Willie Revillame. I think he was outside the top 13 or the top 15 even. Tapos bigla na siyang nag-number 8. What did he do right?
Well, actually wala siya sa amin nung September kasi sabi niya nung September or nung June, if I'm not mistaken, he would not be running. The highest I think that we got him in the past, that was in the March survey, was about 25 or 26%. This 43.6% that we're seeing right now might be a result of largely his declaration or his filing his certificate of candidacy. And as you know, he's popular. And over the past years, his popularity has been a product of a show that also provides different forms of assistance to the general public. So it's a persona that he has created for himself through his shows, which might also be the one that is essentially bringing support for him.
Pero si Pastor Apollo Kibuloy ay nasa number 31 despite enjoying a very high popularity of 92%.
Oh, you mean the awareness rating?
92 yung awareness niya.
Yeah.
Tapos number
Well,
31 siya dun sa
sabi nga,
listahan.
maaaring kilala ka, pero pagkakilanlan sa iyo ay hindi naman masyadong maayos. Ibig sabihin, hindi nakakuha ng suporta. So you might be known, but basically what they gather as information is not necessarily something that will draw them to express preference for that particular candidate.
Okay, Sir Ronald, what about traditional opposition candidates such as ito nga si Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan? They're notably not in the top of the polls. Kaya pa po ba nila humabol?
Kaya pa because we've seen in the case of former Senator Kiko Pangilinan and Bam Aquino, we've seen increases in terms of their preferences from September. We saw an increase in terms of their preference from September to December. And I should note that in the past, when we look at surveys that we did December before the election, especially during the start of the campaign, we actually can expect significant shifts in terms of support. Yung mga nag-a-advertise ngayon, maaring tumataas sila, pero eventually, pag nagkalabanan na ng advertisement at pag nagsimula ng kampanya, maaring mag-iba ang level ng suporta doon sa mga individual na ngayon ay hindi pa masyadong umiikot o nagpapalabas ng kanilang mga patalastas.
Although sabi mo nga kanina, sir, yung top officials naman hindi pa nakaka-impluwensya dito sa ranking ng mga senatorial candidates. But I wonder, recently kasi merong pictures, photos, 'di ba, na kumalat na kasama ni former Senator Kiko Pangilinan, sina PBBM and First Lady. How will this affect his candidacy?
Well, it would be dependent on really how people or blocks that are supporting him will take that particular picture. He has come up with an explanation with regard to that picture. Let me just point out, no, if you look at the past, what is useful to be part of the administration slate? The most useful element of being part of the administration slate is the promise that you can use certain resources or that resources of government might be disbursed in support of, let's say, members of the slate. But of course, that's something that we cannot really see that would be provided to all the 12 members of the administration slate. In the previous election, for example, where we had, in the previous midterm election, this was in 2019, that being part of the administration slate was definitely helpful to Bongo, to Bato de la Rosa, and to Francis Tolentino.
Yes.
More specifically for the last, he did not make it into the Senate race in the previous election, but he was able to slide in the last election. He's running for re-election now as part of the administration, but he's out of contention in the survey. Let's see whether resources from the administration would be able to assist him in terms of generating support, at least from a number of areas where the administration may actually be implementing programs that will show that they need the support of their candidates and therefore mobilize the voters to support those candidates come May 2025.
Kumbaga iba talaga yung lakas nung Duterte slate noon, nung administrasyong Duterte. Tama po ba? Pero ngayon, medyo humina po ba yung yung power na yon ng Duterte brand to carry other politicians to the top
Medyo
of
mas mahina na, Gretchen, kasi pag tingnan mo yung example, approval and trust ratings ni Vice President Sara, ay mababa na. So, masasabi natin na hindi na ganun kalakas. At ang pinaka-importante dyan, maaring popular sila pero may control ba sila sa mga institusyon sa pamahalaan, sa pambansang level ng pamahalaan na maaring makatulong sa kanilang mga kandidato. Kinakailangan nilang kuhanin yung suporta sa iba't ibang grupo, hindi nila maaring gamitin yung kapangyarihan na nanggagaling sa posisyon na pinagmamayhawakan nila, na wala na sa kanila, sa pambansang pamahalaan.
Pero si Senator Imee Marcos, medyo nakakagulat yung pag-drop niya. I think nasa gitna siya noon, tapos ngayon nasa number 13. Kasama dyan from 10 to 15 is Abby Binay, Lito Lapid, Bato de la Rosa, and Camille Villar. Nakikinig ako kanina sa story ko, and sabi mo this is a very competitive midterm elections. What would these candidates need to do to outpace each other? Knowing that they already have high awareness, saan po maglalaban-laban yan?
Well, nasa campaign messaging ngayon, nasa negotiations that they will do with certain local candidates. This is a national election, so that means that essentially they're competing for what in our discipline would be called market votes. People don't exactly know them, no? There are about more than 65 million voters. I don't know how many will turn out. Let's say 80% turns out, or let's say about 55 million turn out. What is the level or the depth of knowledge of these voters with regard to these individuals? They know the Tulfo name, and they might just be voting because of the Tulfo name. So if you're going to compete with the Tulfos, then you might as well bring your, not just a name recall, but it's like a top-of-mind choice. And how can you bring yourself to become a top-of-mind choice on the part of voters?
Kung si Senator Imee po ay pumili na finally, because yun nga sabing kanina, namamangka siya sa dalawang ilog and it might have hit her numbers. If she finally takes a stand, sides with one political party, kung kapatid man niya yun, o kay VP Sara, do you think it will help her?
Well, she would really have to calibrate. I would not really have the numbers basically show that she has increased her preference from September, no? If I recall, her voting support increased by almost 8 points. But eventually, she will have to be very clear about where she stands in relation to the conflict between her brother and Sara Duterte. But the other thing is that, she can also avoid that particular conflict and talk about her position on key issues that definitely affect the public without necessarily bringing herself to just one camp. No? So there are two things that her campaign strategists will think about. I'm really not a campaign strategist, but I mean, just observing elections in the past, I think it will be difficult really for one to, especially when there are two conflicting camps, that you stay in the middle. You need to take sides, and in this case, taking a side might definitely be of help because it will generate support from those who will be supportive of the administration or the Dutertes for that matter. And as I said, both her brother and Sara Duterte have seen significant changes in terms of their approval and trust.
Sir Ronald, what about the Tulfo brothers? I mean, they're still dominating itong mga senatorial surveys. Sa usapin po ng political dynasties, what does this indicate among the preference of Filipino voters?
Well, it basically indicates that, people, while there is a segment of the population based on our own surveys that say that's about 1/3, that they will never vote for a candidate who's part of who has relatives who have been elected or are elected to various positions. You have 2/3 are either undecided or do not mind voting for a member of a political clan.
Oo.
So,
Baka
pati
pwede
ang Pilipino sa sa usapin ng kung dapat bang ihalal ang mga miyembro ng pampolitikang pamilya, lalong-lalo na para sa parehong institusyon.
Baka pwede rin pag-usapan na nung mga kandidato yung mga issue na mataas ang disapproval rating. For example, yung sa ekonomiya. Basic disapproval is the predominant sentiment towards the latter's work in controlling the rising prices of basic commodities, which is at 82%. Medyo dun nadismaya ang mga tao, ano? Pag pinag-usapan ba yan ng mga kandidato, kahit papaano, tataas ang kanilang approval pag meron silang mga solusyon? Or is that not a strong way to pull up your numbers when it comes to trust and
ang
approval?
mangyayari dyan, lahat ng kandidato, sasakyan yung issue na yan. Sasabihin na, sisiguraduhin namin na mayroon kaming gagawin para para matugunan itong mataas na presyo mabilihin. Ang dapat sigurong tanungin ng mga botante ay, ano ba yung inyong gagawin? At dapat siguro natin malaman kung ginawa nila yun ay resolve ba talaga ang problema na mataas na presyo mabilihin. Yung inflation has eased, but the prices of commodities continue to be high beyond the reach of ordinary Filipinos. So what can be done? What could a senator do, a legislator do in order to assist or address this particular problem that we've had for quite some time? And you're correct, Gretch, no? If you have 8 out of 10 Filipinos disapproving of the national administration's performance in
The economy,
addressing
yes.
inflation, this is actually not going to help the candidates of the administration if it is really a referendum on the performance of the national administration. But as I said, it's partly a referendum and it's partly not a referendum because the people who will be running will not be running really exclusively as people who should be held accountable for the administration's sins of omission or commission.
They're not closely identified with with what you are saying. Oh, ano,
as I
siguro
note-
baka makalimutan din kapag ka nasabi na may ayuda.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, thank you so much for explaining the numbers to us and helping us dive in deep into that. Thank you for joining the big story. We
Merry
have Pulse
Christmas.
Asia President Ronald Holmes. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
All right, we're pausing for a quick break, but up next, we'll be speaking with Citizens Budget Tracker Ken Abante on the proposed 2025 national budget when the big story returns. Keep it here.
Ang wish ko ngayong Pasko ay tatlo. Una, sana mabawasan yung mga dumadating na bagyo. Ang pangalawa, sana magkaroon talaga ng bigas na 20 pesos. At ang pangatlo, kahit ayaw nila, tayo-tayo na lang. Unity. Because unity begins with you and ends with a why. Lord De Vera, maligayang Pasko. Screenshot mo to.
Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News.
President Bongbong Marcos is holding a ceremonial signing of the proposed national budget for 2025 next Monday, December 30. That's according to his sister, Senator Imee Marcos. Earlier, Malacanang reported that the president met with the cabinet's economic cluster composed of the Departments of Finance and Budget and Management and the National Economic and Development Authority. They also had with them the Secretary of the Department of Public Works and Highways, or the DPWH. The palace further said there were no discussions about the possibility of a reenacted budget for 2025.
Let's talk about the budget with Kenneth Abante, coordinator of the Citizens Budget Tracker. He also served various leadership roles at the Department of Finance from 2012 to 2016. And he posted right before his silent retreat some thoughts on the budget. Good evening, Ken. Welcome to the big story.
Good evening, Gretch, Maricel, Pauline. Merry
Right.
Christmas.
Alam mo, galing ka lang sa retreat, so gusto ko tang bigyan ng pagkakataon na ipaliwanag, baka nakapag-isip-isip ka pa lalo tungkol dito sa budget, which you describe as one of the worst budgets you've seen, having observed the budget since 2013. Why do you say that? And what are the trends that you observe with the budget on election years?
Maraming salamat, Gretch. So, yung sa unang tanong, ano yung nakikita ko tungkol dito sa budget na to? This budget really is one of the worst I've ever seen because it makes us beholden to politicians. No? There has been huge cuts in social and health services and even education services that we should be receiving automatically, and seeming preference, no, for congressional pork. No? Essentially, yung mga programa na kailangan pang humingi ng approval sa mga kongresista para makuha mo siya. So things like the medical assistance to indigent patients, or things like AKAP, yung sa DSWD, na yun yung ginagawa sa rounds, no, ng mga kongresista ngayon. So kailangan malakas ka sa mga politiko bago mo makuha yung mga serbisyo na ginamit naman yung pera na binigay mo bilang buwis. So that's what we see in the budget, especially during this election year, and specifically this administration. So I really think that this budget robs us of our dignity as Filipinos. We should be expecting no less from government than receiving public services that should be ours and should not be dependent on whether or not we're close to a politician.
But do you see this trend during election years like back in 2022, back in 2016? I mean, ganun ba? Parang biglang nawawala ng budget itong health, agri, education na pupunta sa infra, DPWH, sa mga ganyang proyekto, katulad ng AKAP. Normal
I think
ba?
merong,
Go ahead.
merong particularly special, no? Pero in a bad way, itong budget na to. And that is a lot of the things that were slashed were really things that we need to live and to survive, no? And then nagkakaroon ng increase, no, sa 289 billion peso increase, actually, Gretch, net increase ng Department of Public Works and Highways budget, no? I cannot say that this in particular is unique to this particular election, no? Pero binabantayan talaga natin 'yan, no? Kapag tumataas ng sobra-sobra, tulad ng tumaas ng sobra-sobra sa Bicameral Conference Committee, yung DPWH budget, red flag 'yan para sa aming mga budget watchers. Kasi sinasabi nga po ni Mayor Magalong o ng Mayors for Good Governance, mayor siya ng Baguio, na karamihan daw dito sa mga type ng project na to, halimbawa mga flood control o mga road widening projects, normally yung SOP raw dito, sabi ni Mayor Magalong, mga 60 to 70%. No? So tumataas ng ganun kalaki. No? So normally tinitingnan natin siya bilang senyales, no, na baka hindi nagagamit yung buwis natin sa tamang pamamaraan, no, at kailangan talaga nating maging mapagmatsyag dito sa ginagawa na to. At mukhang hayagan na yung tinatawag nating bagong pork, no, and in fact this has been in the budgets for the last couple of years, yung AKAP nga, no, na imagine niyo, Gretch, na yung 4-piece program, yung Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program, yung mga nanay ng programa na yun, sinasabi na na-cut yung budget nila by 50 billion pesos. No, at sinasabi nila makaka-apekto raw to sa education, sa health ng kanilang mga anak. Pero yung AKAP, mataas pa rin yung amounts, no? And in fact, tinaasan din yung congressional budgets for these, no? By around 18 billion pesos, no? Sa House of Representatives, nag-increase ng 17 billion pesos. Sa Senate, nag-increase ng 1 billion pesos, no? We want our social services to be delivered in a professional manner, no, na hindi arbitrary kung kakilala mo lang o hindi yung isang politiko. No, so we'll see even wider inequality, especially as the election period approaches.
Pero sa dami ng red flags na nakita mo, including the budget for DPWH, ano yung pwedeng maging remedy? Malapit na mag-2025.
Opo. Nakita ko po yung update kanina. Sadly, that's not the best option. Yung pagsasign na ng budget this December 30. The best remedy should have been the Bicameral Conference Committee really reconvening, and then sila po ay dapat inayos, no, hinayuma yung budget na yun at binalik sa Pangulo for the President to sign. What appears to be happening now is that the President might do line item vetoes po, no, specific na mga programa, aalisin niya, no, isa-strike out niya, and most likely yung mangyayari po next year, magkakaroon ng special appropriation. Pero hindi pa tayo sure, depende po sa mangyayari sa December 30.
Supplemental bill, you mean?
Opo, parang special appropriation. It's like a new law. Parang yung Bayanihan Acts, no? Nung 2020. So mukhang yun po yung mangyayari. Kasi kapag strike out po yung, halimbawa, mag-strike out ka ng mga provision sa budget, that will not result in an increase in other budgets. No, you can't do that because the president does not have the power to appropriate. No, under the Constitution, meron lamang siyang line item veto powers. No, so yun po yung tinatry nating tingnan. We'll see sa mga balita po in the coming
There
days.
seems to be another remedy, taking savings, augmenting it through savings from the National Treasury. Is that through the supplemental bill? Or parang may ibang usapin dyan? Kasi tama ba na pwede lang si Presidenteng magbawas, hindi siya pwedeng magdagdag? And when does it happen that the budget just gets reenacted from the previous one?
Correct. Siguro last question muna kasi yun yung pinakasimple. When does a budget become reenacted? Kapag pumatak na yung January 1, no? Tapos kung wala pang budget, reenacted yung last year's budget, no? So kailangan talagang may masign kung ayaw natin magkaroon ng reenacted before
So
the
mahirap
year
yung
ends.
BICAM. Mahirap yung BICAM.
Mahirap na. So yun nga eh. Pero yun pa rin yung best option actually that many budget analysts say, and that's the call we're continuing to push. Pero yun nga eh, in our experience monitoring the budget, kapag nagkakaroon ng supplemental or tinatawag nating special appropriations bill, it takes quite a few months, no, before this is released, and a lot of the social benefits, even the education budget, no, na slinash ng halos 12 billion pesos, and it affects a lot of our learners, especially yung mga binagyo, no, that will take a longer time, and for example, the students and teachers in Bicol, na tinamaan kami ng 2 bagyo at nag-emergency response po kami para sa mga eskwelahan na ito. We can't wait for that at kulang-kulang na yung budget para sa kanilang reconstruction. Tapos yun pa yung silinash ng Kongreso.
Pero hindi ba, or allowed ba yung pag-reconvene ng BICAM based on legal procedures? Because I think this is one of the points raised by President Bongbong Marcos during his interview last week, na wala daw kasi sa process, wala daw sa procedure yung pag-reconvene ng BICAM. So ang only option that he has is to use his veto power.
That's not true po. So according to one of the professors, Professor Dante Gatmaytan, no, who recently published this paper, just actually today, an article that says that it's still possible, no? Kasi nangyari na po yan before. So I think Magna Carta for Seafarers Act, no? The BICAM version got to the president's desk, pero po binalik yun. No, so posible pa po yun, no? And there has been precedent for this. At posible po yun na mabago pa yung BICAM kung ayaw permahan ng Pangulo. And yun, they have to talk about it and negotiate it among themselves. But we as citizens and as watchers, we cannot take this line down, no? Ziniro yung PhilHealth budget, slinash yung education budget, slinash yung 4Ps, inakyat yung DPWH contracts at flood control na hindi naman tayo sure kung gumagana, at inakyat yung AKAP, no, na at nagkakaroon pa rin ng guarantee letters, no, na nakakawala talaga ng dignidad. This is not something we will really stand for, and this is not the kind of country I want to live in, no, where I am at the mercy of Congress, essentially.
Well, Ken, huling katanungan kasi we're running out of time, no? But this is about PhilHealth. Una-una kung wala sa budget yung subsidy ng PhilHealth, kasi ibig sabihin wala bang item doon? At kung paano yun i-veto kung wala yun? Paano dadagdagan? I mean, is there no other way to fix that but through a supplemental budget? Second question on PhilHealth, yung ICLs, Insurance Contract Liabilities, DOH ASEC Albert Domingo says, masyadong mataas ang computation ng ICL ng PhilHealth na 1 trillion. Sabi niya hindi dapat ganun kalaki because they are not a pension fund and therefore they should keep just enough 2 years worth of operating expenses to be able to fill out yung ICLs. Sinasabi naman ng PhilHealth, hindi, we are living up to standards held to us to keep it at that level. So ano ba yung tama talaga?
So yung tatanungin kasi natin dyan, Gretch, kung yung subsidy ng PhilHealth ay enough na ba? No, kailangan nating tanungin, ano ba yung main objective ng National Health Insurance Program under the Universal Healthcare Law? No? Universal na ba yung universal healthcare? Mukhang hindi pa eh. Kasi kung makikita po natin yung out-of-pocket expenses ng bawat isang Pilipino, out-of-pocket expenses were still at 45% in 2022, no? Meaning, kahit magkaroon ka ng catastrophic illness, something like cancer, no, posible pa rin na mabangkarote yung buong household mo, no? So, gustong sabihin, enough na ba yung pera ng PhilHealth from a universal healthcare perspective? I don't think that is correct, no? But secondly, dun sa financials, no, babasahin ko po itong isang article ni Professor Rico Villanueva ng UP Los Baños, at sinasabi niya po dito that PhilHealth is already balance sheet insolvent. Gustong sabihin, mas mataas po yung liabilities, no, yung utang, no, even for the future, yung projected na posibleng medical expenses na kailangan bayaran ng PhilHealth, mas mataas siya kaysa assets, no, at kahit yung mga premiums at cash na nasa PhilHealth. So sinasabi niya po dito, for March 2024, yung liabilities were twice the assets. 1.2 trillion yung liabilities, around 600 billion yung assets. At equity raw already negative at 640 billion, no. Ibang usapin pa kung whether the insurance contract liabilities are accurate, no. Pero kung titingnan po natin from a universal healthcare perspective, enough na ba yung pera ng PhilHealth?
Actually, sabi ni Asik Domingo, dinidisiplina nila itong PhilHealth, no? Kinukuha nila kasi hindi sila, kumbaga, ayaw nila gastusin yung pera. Sinisave lang nila, tinatabi nila. Imbis na i-improve yung services, they are holding it as a reserve fund.
I don't think that's the right disciplining mechanism. The right accountability mechanism is consider whether the current board are still the right people to lead PhilHealth. No, consider whether the people who are running PhilHealth are running them well. And ano ba yung mga systems na kailangan pasukin, ilagay, no, para gawing universal yung universal healthcare. I know it takes a long time, no, but I think this myth that PhilHealth has enough money shouldn't be propagated, no. Hindi po ito yung katotohanan, at kapag tiningnan natin yung tunay na state ng healthcare natin sa Pilipinas, kulang na kulang pa po yung perang binibigay sa PhilHealth. Tanungin niyo po yung ordinaryong mamamayan na nakapunta sa ospital or gustong mag-outpatient care services sa kanilang mga barangay o mga ospital, kung nararamdaman nila na universal na yung universal healthcare. And you will probably get no for an answer.
We have several days left to the year, and we do hope the budget turns out for the better. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Advance Merry Christmas to you, Kenneth Abante, coordinator of the Citizens Budget Tracker.
It's time for another quick break, but right after that, PTEC sees a holiday rush as passengers head home to the provinces 2 days before Christmas. We'll get a live update at the terminal when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Hi everyone! I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. Maligayang Pasko po sa inyong lahat. I wish that you get all that your heart desires. You get enough rest and time to spend with your loved ones. May it be your family or your friends. At syempre, pinaka-importante, sana masarap ang handa ninyo.
Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. The Bureau of Immigration has issued the final warning to foreign POGO workers to leave the Philippines by December 31. During a public briefing, immigration spokesperson Dana Sandoval reiterated that there will be no more extensions. Failure to comply will result in immediate blacklisting from re-entry into the country. Even those that have family in the Philippines would need to leave the country and go through the proper process in order to return. According to the BI, there is an estimated 6,000 to 7,000 foreign workers that still need to leave the country. 21,000 of the 33,000 have already left.
It's 2 days before Christmas, and the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange, or PTEX, is having a surge of passengers And News 5 correspondent Ian Suyo is live at PTEC to share with us what's happening on the ground. Hi, Ian. Are there any delays already in the trips at gaano karaming tao ang nandyan?
Pawi, as of 7 p.m., the PTEC's management has recorded around 190,000 passengers here inside PTEX. Most of the trips here, particularly heading to Bicol region, unfortunately have been fully booked.
Ayan.
Ian, so far, kamusta yung security? Hanggang kailan nila ina-expect yung ganito kadaming tao dyan sa PTEX?
Kasi as per the PTEX management, the security remains tight. The security officers from PTEX themselves have been imposing strict measures, and yung mga nakukuha nila ng mga matatalas na bagay, mga objects such as knives and mga pointed objects, kagad nilang kino-confiscate yan, including yung mga fireworks. No? We've seen earlier na merong mga passengers dito who tried to bring fireworks, possibly sana para sa bagong taon, pero kinumpiska ito ng mga tauhan ng PTEX, pinagbabawal ito sa mga bus terminals. And particularly naman sa mga delays, ayon sa mga nakausap natin kanina ng mga dispatchers, 4 to 5 hours daw yung posibleng delay, particular na sa Bicol region, dahil ito daw yung pinaka-challenging sa ngayon ang biyahe dahil sa traffic dun sa mga lugar kagaya ng Legazpi at ng Regay.
Nababalitaan kami parang may pa-free toll daw dyan. Totoo ba?
Christmas?
Yes, well, this is a good news for all motorists out there. The Metro Pacific Tollways incorporated expressways such as SCTEX, CALAX, and NLEX, as well as NLEX Connector, will be having free tolls starting from December 24 to 25. Also from December 31st until January 1 in the morning. In line with that, yung mga SMC-owned na expressways din kagaya ng Skyway, NAIA Expressway, as well as SLEX will be having free tolls.
That will surely be a Christmas treat for motorists. But for now, thank you very much for that update. That was News 5 correspondent Ian Suyu. 2 days left before Christmas.
Yeah.
2 days na lang.
Christmas.
Oo, makikita kami ni Pawi dito.
Ako magbabakasyon. Ganon talaga.
All right, and on this note, that's the show for us tonight here on The Big Story.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Nako, magpahinga maigi kasi
Yeah.
magpupuyat tayo bukas.
Yes.